Hi everyone, DR.ABC here, and we have been engaging in a number of courageous conversations since the start of your orientation. Maybe many of you have been engaging courageous conversations years before this week because of your own personal journey, your own personal identity, lived experiences, and just position to some of these conversations we're having. For many of you also, this may be a very new journey for you, engaging in these much needed conversations. So what I'm going to do is leave with you a few reminders, a few tips of as we engage in these conversations. And for many of us, this is new, right? Many of us, this is new for you. And we, as Rose in 2015 said, we all dread them. And we can call those courageous conversation because they sometimes require so much courage to handle. On the other hand, there is the other option of avoidance. We might have tried that option before, even several times. The reality is that in a situation where a courageous conversation needs to take place, avoidance will only lead to decline or worsening of the situation. Therefore, we must engage to grow and to learn. And so I'm leaving to you a number of tips as we engage in these conversations this week, in the past, and of course, in your future courses. And I want to encourage you to come prepared to learn. We talk about, for me, I never forget when I went to Teachers College back in 1992, 1993, and the definition of learning was a change in behavior brought about by an experience. And so I encourage all of us to experience these conversations. And so we end up growing, we end up learning, because as I always say in my workshops, the world is bigger than your cul-de-sac. The world is bigger than your avenue or your street. And so come prepared to learn. Another thing to do in an institution of learning is come prepared to unlearn. There are many things that many assumptions and stereotypes and single stories that many of us, including myself, we have been fed for years. And I want us to remember that this is a space for us to also unlearn some of those things. Another thing is check your bias, prejudice, and your privileges. As we engage in this conversation, remember you're coming from spaces and places where you have certain ideas of what a conversation about a certain topic should be like. So as we are learning, unlearning, we are opening ourselves, we have to also check ourselves. It's a constant process of understanding who you are in position or in relationship or in context, our nearness to the conversation that is happening. I always remind persons that when I come to certain conversation, or when I come to maybe any conversation, I do show up as a Black man, because that is who I am. And those are the lens to which I see a lot of things. And so my experience, my experience will be different from yours. But I want us to be intentional to understand as we engage in these conversations that we have to also check ourselves as we engage in these conversations. The next one is stay engaged. Oftentimes when these conversations, they get courageous. They demand us to be braver. They demand certain moral courage. They demand us to self-reflect. They challenge us. What we find is that often people step away and they disengage. And I'm sure you'll hear a narrative around, in spaces that you step away when you're uncomfortable. I say to you, sit in that discomfort. I say to you, experience that discomfort. I say to you, these conversations, they are not going to be the usual fairy tale. They are not the Jack on the Beanstalk. They are not the Rapunzel. They are not the happy ever after conversation, because many times what we're talking about are persons or are situations where people are experiencing inequities. And so, yes, these conversations will be uncomfortable. These conversations will sometimes allow you to experience some level of discomfort, experience that discomfort. And the last thing I want to say to you, the reason why we are doing these conversations are for us to grow, for each and every one of us to become better educators, better persons, for us to be equipped to teach in the classroom of 2022, 2023, 2024, and beyond. And so we want to ensure that as we do this work, as we engage in these conversations, we're thinking about the action. We're thinking about what will I do with this conversation, and how will this conversation impact my work as a teacher, as a student. And so let us experience these conversations. Let us grow. Thank you.